So I'm not sure if there's quite any more questions on the details of that, but I guess I'll end by talking. I was asked to talk some about the faith-based advocacy, the role of faith-based advocacy in the legislature. And I got to thinking about that today and really got down into the weeds about what it could be and what I ought to say. But really, it's in some respects, it's pretty simple for us. When I think about faith-based advocacy, I think about it on two levels. One, at the legislative level, in the legislative process, and what our role is there as a faith-based organization. I think we're the only faith-based organization in Santa Fe on a full-time basis. I know the Catholic Church has Alan Sanchez is the representative for the three bishops, but we also speak on behalf of the New Mexico Conference of Churches, which includes the three dioceses and the mainline denominations in the state. But I think the first thing that I'll say about what our role is to offer legislators a different lens, if you will, from which to look at the various issues that we face in the state. And that, there's this, if we want to take poverty as an example, there is the perception on the part of many that folks who are living in poverty, they're there for because of their own decisions and their own poor decision-making ability. And therefore it's their fault. And therefore we have, as a government, we have no role in that. It's their own doing. And yet, of course, the church thinks very differently about that. And the truth is, it's not the case. It's much more complex than that. So one of my roles, and it was of course made more difficult this year because we were not in person, and I've not really had the opportunity to develop more individual relationships with legislators, but is to offer that different lens. And what was interesting, I don't want to get into the weeds, but we saw how people's view of poverty changed in the last 40 or 50 years, from the 60s and President Johnson's great war on poverty, to the 80s and 90s, when Americans' attitudes had changed to, or more Americans' attitudes had changed to, no, it's their fault. Poverty is an individual's, they're there because of their own decisions. And therefore the government doesn't have a role. And so we saw lots of our welfare programs deeply cut in the 80s and 90s in the Reagan and Clinton administrations. And so our role is to share a different lens for which legislators, for them to look through about the issues that we face in this state and about the people of this state and their individual stories. Tim and I had this experience, just very briefly, it's the perfect example of this, when there was a bill to connect SNAP benefits to WIC. Yeah, remember that, Tim? And I just happened to see it on the docket, so I stayed and spoke against it. But it was very clear that the sponsor of that bill had a certain vision or a certain view of what people who rely on SNAP benefits, what they're like and the decisions they make. And it's an incorrect view, and it's an unjust view. And so Tim and I very quickly tried to, in my 1 minute or 2 minutes, offer a different glimpse of that, a different lens for which those legislators to look through. Thankfully, the bill was shot down pretty quickly, tabled, and didn't get any farther. But that's an example of that, where we're a voice for a different lens to look through. Let's see, what else did I want to share? I think we are, as a faith-based organization, we're uniquely positioned to challenge legislatures and to ask those hard questions. I think that was the beauty of HB 207, was that it was putting before the legislatures hard questions to consider and to think about in terms of solving the issue of hunger and poverty in the state. And so we're in a position to, I think, to ask those questions and to challenge them to answer those. I think, like all lobbyists, if you will, our role is to provide great data, accurate data, trustworthy data and information to legislators, and we work hard to do that. And I think in the end, the last thing I'll say about the legislative level is it's all about the relationships, and my role as an advocate to build those trusting relationships with legislators on both sides of the aisle, and so that we are a voice of morality, if you will, of doing what's right. I mean, I had quite a few legislators over the last year remind me or tell me or share stories with me about my predecessor, Ruth Hoffman, who was there 20 years, and about how she was, for many, the moral voice in that legislature because of her position in the Lutheran Advocacy Ministry. And so I think that's part of our unique role as well, is to be that moral voice and to be in one of those many voices of equity and justice in the system. The second level, and I'll just do this really quickly, has to do with congregations and members. So I work at the state level, State Department's legislative process, but also work very closely with congregations, our ELCA congregations. There are Lutheran bodies that are not as maybe more progressive, or who see the role of the church in public policy like we do. But I work with our ELCA congregations and the New Mexico Conference of Churches congregations, hopefully in the coming years, to connect them to the legislative process, both as a congregation, but also individual members, and to help them recognize that their calling as congregations were really good at responding to immediate needs and to reacting to immediate needs and to providing, food and backpacks and all these kinds of things that are needed in the community. But if that's all we do, we're failing, because we've got to go farther upstream and address why do these problems and issues exist? Fundamentally, why is poverty? Why do we have poverty in this state to the degree that we do? Why do we have hunger? And if we're not addressing it farther upstream, then all we're doing is providing aid to the symptoms of the problem. And so I work with congregations to see that they need to move beyond just that responding to immediate needs in front of them, because they do that great. It's the advocacy piece that we need to work on. I think one of our roles also in congregations, as you all know, if you're part of a faith community, or if you just have a family, that everybody's all over the map on where they stand on certain issues. And so one of our roles in congregations is to create space for members to come around the table who have diverse views, and to discern, to study, to come to some sort of point where they can make a decision individually or collectively about where they stand on an issue. Our ELCA has a whole slew of social issues from which I advocate for or against legislation in this state. But everybody in the congregations are kind of across the map on that. And so we want to bring them together, and we want them to have that safe space to discuss, number one, does faith have a voice in this? And if so, what is the voice? And what are they called as members of a congregation to do, individually and collectively? And that's, of course, much harder said than done. And that's it's been almost impossible this last year, where we're not able to meet in person. So creating that space for people to discern what their action is going to be individually and collectively. Finally, I think it all goes back to a key role for us in this office is what many would call developing and growing faith maturity in our congregations, such that their faith is not limited to what they do on Sunday, but they view all of their life through this lens of their faith, including how they make decisions on how they view their neighbor and what they do in response to their neighbors in need. I guess I should probably end there, because I can keep going on and on. But Judy, what else? Anything else?
The only other thing I can think of is what in House Bill 207 spoke especially to you as the Lutheran Advocacy Ministry director?
Well, to me, it was just the comprehensive nature of it. The fact that it was working to address the issue of hunger in the state from all levels and all places. It wasn't just a one shot here or one shot there. And it was trying to address the really complex reasons why we have hunger in this state, many of which Representative Stansbury alluded to. And that's, I think, I was very attracted to it, because that's where we as a church need to be. We need to be in that space where we're looking at it from that big picture, and trying to coax our legislature to do that very same thing, in individual legislatures. It was an interesting process to watch, especially in the one committee where you did see, even like I mentioned earlier, about how people view their neighbors. It was very clear that there were legislators in that committee who viewed people in hunger as, well, it's their own fault. I mean, we had one legislator, in fact, say that. And it was just astounding to me that that people view the world in that way, but it's a reality. And so, of course, making lots of mental notes on what I need to do or what maybe can be done, maybe nothing can be done. But I think it was really important to us because of its the comprehensive nature of it. I think one of the things that was frustrating, I think, was I think some of our legislators just have a really hard time looking at things from that big perspective, because it's very complex. There's lots of moving parts and pieces, and there aren't simple answers. And so I think this is my own observation. I think for some legislators, it was kind of like, whoa, this is so big. I don't even know if I can deal with this, or it goes against my own political philosophy of big government versus, it shouldn't be dealt with on this level. So I don't know if that answered your question, Judy, but.
Yes, yeah, it does very well. And thank you so much. That was very inspiring. I've been with Lutheran Advocacy for many years, and I just appreciate that presence that faith people can bring to the public square. It's different from sometimes what we see in public life.
Yeah, well, I'll end by saying I've been nothing but thoroughly impressed with all the people in the different coalitions we're a part of and what they bring to the table. Some of whom are here tonight, and this state has so many fine and talented people working to address these very complex issues, and I think over time we'll get there. So a shout out and thank you to all those who are here who've helped me learn a lot this last year about these complex issues. It's been a good partnership, and I look forward to continuing it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Kurt. I think I'll step in now as far as the questions. My